beside you, and she's just shy of hopping out of her chair.
Big change,
Yeah, as one of those people before profit lefties who believe that there is a big divide in this society between those who pay everything and those who pay nothing. I actually agree with Leo on that, but I locate the divide at those who pay nothing are Apple, for example, who owe us 13 billion and who this government are spending at least $1 million in fancy lawyers' fees to appeal the decision for Apple not to pay us the money. It's probably even more like 18 and 19 billion when you add in the interest. And those who pay very low, very, very low corporation tax, and those who pay no wealth tax. And indeed, there's a whole plethora of billionaires and millionaires whose presence is growing in this country, who pay very little and expect everything back for them. And when I say expect everything back, they expect everything back in forms of lax labour laws, reduced sort of contracts for workers, which we'll come to it later on, but at the heart of the bus Éireann dispute, this is the sort of issue that's there. Take down wages, reduce the type of contracts people work on, give them more precarious and flexible contracts, make more profits for the bosses, and then they don't pay their taxes on those profits.
So do you think that there
needs to think about who isn't actually.
There you go.
Is
that some common ground there between the two of you?
What are you trying to create a new movement?
Trying to create harmony. The sun is shining. Come on.
A new coalition.
I'm
stuck for words. No, the point I'm making though about our corporation profit tax is that actually it works. And if you look at the amount of revenue that we bring in as a country,
it works for the corporations, Leo.
No, it actually works for the Exchequer. It works for the Exchequer as well. If you actually look at what we bring in,
can I just give you a figure that I looked at earlier on? In 2007, 20% of all revenue in this country came from income tax. In 2012, it was 42%, and it's gone up even more since. So that means that less of the overall share of the tax take is coming from the very, very wealthy, is coming from the corporations,
that's
and
not
is coming from the millionaires and the billionaires at the top.
Why that happened principally was a collapse in stamp duty.
It isn't because
we were taking so much.
It is clear from all sorts of figures that we, and Europe have a problem with us for this, that we don't take enough tax from corporations. Europe have a problem with it. We're going to be pulled into line. The days of being a tax haven and being able to get away with it are coming to an end. And that is not because the lefties are on the rise all over the place. That is because the world is saying you can't keep doing this. It's unfair. It's uncompetitive.
Okay, let's see what Willie O'Dea thinks.
Because the lefties are on the rise, and we're going to have a redistribution of the wealth.
Europe is
and maybe
copying
that will
us.
happen.
If you look at what Macron, for example, is advocating
Europe
in France,
are not copying us. Europe are going to put manners on us now.
Willie O'Dea, I want to come back to the substantive point, because you had
contribution to something they actually get in return. Because what happens at the moment, and this would be, I suppose,
that you get nothing back.
Well, is that it all goes into a pot and spending goes up and services don't improve.
You get your social services back. You pay the civil service.
I think when we talk about services, we should also include things like transport and health and education that people are on the receiving end of, but they're very poor by comparison to other European countries. The normal services that one expects and local authority funding for roads and parks and all the rest of it are very, very poor services for what we contribute.
I just want to come to Dan O'Brien and get your view of what Leo set out today in the Independent.
Let's just say, I think, in fairness, there's nobody here from the Guards, and that most of us, I think, have good experiences with the Guards, and most Guards are fine, upstanding people. But it's not just a cultural thing, and if you want evidence of that, just have a look at some of the reports the Garda Inspectorate have written, hundreds of pages, goes through not just culture issues, but management issues, performance issues. This is an organisation that is dysfunctional, and the hundreds of pages in Garda Inspectorate reports show that from top to bottom there are real problems about how the organisation functions.
I mean, I know you're maintaining that you trust Noreen O'Sullivan on this issue, and that there's checks and balances in place, and that you'll make sure that they're implemented and that they're correct and above board. But following hot on the heels of the McCabe case and the Garda whistleblowers, do you not think it's time to say this is too far and too much, and we can't have a Garda commissioner that stays in place when all of these flawed systems, whistleblower scandals, etc., are piling on top of each other, and the people, more importantly, whatever about the politicians, are losing confidence in the police that are supposed to keep law and order in the country. There's a huge drop in the level of confidence and trust in the Garda Síochána among the ordinary people. And somewhere along the line we have to show that we're seriously going to clean up the act of the law enforcers to make it credible for ordinary people to stomach again.
Yeah, I suppose the answer to that question is The priorities, and I can't put them all in one article. They only gave me 800 words, but I promise you, there'll be lots of opportunities.
Because you had previously said that welfare should be a second chance, not a way of life.
Yes.
So that would tally with what Dan O'Brien
A
is
second
saying.
chance and a safety net. Some people need a safety net.
I think that this really deflects from what's actually going on. There's very, very few people for whom welfare is a way of life. Very few people. Most people will spend their lives either in part-time work or in and out of work or in and out increasingly of precarious type of work. So there's a tiny and ever-shrinking minority of people for whom welfare is a way of life.
Do you agree with that, Leo?
It portrays... I'll just finish because I think...
No. It's a very important point to put to the minister.
I do, and I'm staggered whether she meant to do it or not. She did concede that there is a small proportion of people for whom it is a way of life.
Yeah,
it might only be 1 or 2% of people, but
I would say it's
but they are people we are now cracking down on.
The point I wanted to make to the minister is there were serious discriminatory measures taken during austerity against young people and against pensioners and social welfare. Is he going to restore them? Would that not be part of his reform to make welfare restoration a priority rather than looking at new measures that he's saying will equalise the playing field?
Well,
that we need to restore. There's
yeah.
discrimination against pensioners. There's discrimination against youth on welfare.
Okay.
Well, for example, and I know it's modest, but we did have the first increases for
drift after that, and it has to stop after.
Issues that are important.
It has to stop after the Maybank holiday weekend. There has to be change, or else it's going to be drift.
Well,
I
if
don't think it
nothing's
makes any
getting done,
difference.
Brid, should we not be talking about it?
Well, I don't think it makes any difference who the leader is. They just need to get on with whatever it is internally.
But if
Fine
Padley
Gael
is right
policies are
and
Fine Gael's policy.
the pause button has been pressed on doing anything in government, we should all be concerned.
Well,
about
let
it.
us, from the outside, the opposition and the media, stop focusing on it and make them put the pause button on the other way and put the pressure on them to deal with the bus strike, to deal with water charges, to deal with the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. It is absolutely appalling what's going on with that crisis. It is just getting worse and worse by the day, despite all the announcements by Coveney. And I cannot believe that I'm sitting beside a former Minister for Transport. There's a national transport strike on, and the current Minister for Transport refuses to do anything about it.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that,
incredible.
but I have to take this quick break. We'll talk about the bus strike after this.
City, Galway City, Limerick City, they're all driven by bus air and
Do you mean
drivers.
within the city? Do you
Within
mean
the city.
within the
And
city?
also
As I say, I think
within
there's a
the
case for
rural
that.
areas that they
I
serve.
agree. Within the
I mean,
cities, but most countries, when they have their national network of buses, it's a private market because it's a relatively simple thing. Within cities, there's issues around routes, stops, traffic management. But between cities, most countries now, or have always had, there's not a market failure that requires a government
Well,
service.
it's not true that they have always had. I go to Sweden frequently where my sister lives. I used to work in Germany. Public sector companies run the bus services in between cities and in between towns.
Well, as I say, Britain doesn't, for example. I was in South America
It's not exactly
recently.
a great model of public
just gonna be real
transport.
test.
since-
Intervention of the minister, yes or no?
That model wouldn't work in rural Ireland. And intervention by the minister, yes. You see, this dispute it's not just the minutiae of the dispute itself. There's also policy changes needed, which will form part of the dispute, and that is within the purview of the minister. So he should be.
So it's not just a checkbook he should intervene
It's
with.
not just a
It's
checkbook.
the role
There's
of
a
the
lot
National
there's a lot
Transport
of,
Authority,
absolutely,
and it is the future
route
for public
licensing,
transport.
etc. Yeah,
it is a question of what sort of contracts we want our workers working under, and studying how the private sector actually treats its workers versus
my
the
time is
semi-state.
gone. So, Leo, really quick word on this.
This dispute will be resolved. These disputes are always resolved.
With or
And
without the minister?
Not with the minister, with the bodies that exist to do this, the
I hope
Workplace
the
Relations
Bus
Commission and the
Minister
Labour
for
Force needed.
Transport has nothing to do with the national transport strike.
All right.
An extraordinary situation.
Well, I didn't say that, but I said we have a mechanism to deal with these disputes,
conversation-
and it's a successful mechanism in every dispute in the past.
This conversation might continue past 2 o'clock, but unfortunately we can't. Next Saturday we'll be coming live from Dundalk. We'll be discussing